An ordinary senior center. A quiet chess club. But one man's curiosity would lead him into a web of power, strategy, and danger he could never have imagined. All orchestrated by a seemingly harmless old woman. It was 11 o'clock at night when the quiet streets of Elmwood Heights were suddenly broken by a single, sharp sound. But it was not a gunshot aimed at a person. It was a small, staccato pop that came from a startled cat jumping from the snow-covered curb. The little creature tumbled into the powdery white, leaving behind a dark smear of blood that reflected the dim glow of the street lamp. Nobody saw the old woman standing just beyond the shadow of the corner store. Her back was straight, her posture unassuming, and yet there was something almost predatory in the way she watched. She smiled faintly, her thin lips curling like a secret no one else could hear. Her name was Evelyn Harper, a petite figure with hair as white as the snow and skin that had been weathered not only by years, but by experience that most people could scarcely imagine. She wore a heavy coat, buttoned high against the cold, and gloves that hid the slight tremor in her fingers, a tremor that had nothing to do with age. Every step she took was careful, precise, deliberate, and even at that hour, she seemed to command the streets, as if the city itself bent slightly to accommodate her passage. Inside the Elmwood Senior Center, the smell of coffee and waxed wood filled the air. It was a Wednesday night, and the chess club was gathering as usual. The room was small, crowded with worn tables and chairs that squeaked when people shifted, walls lined with faded photographs of smiling faces from decades past, and a clock that ticked slowly, as if unwilling to move too quickly. Evelyn always arrived early, though nobody particularly noticed her. She moved quietly, selecting a chair at the corner of the room, and set her coat and small leather bag down as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Her reputation among the other seniors was unremarkable. She always lost her games against newcomers, smiled indulgently, and made encouraging remarks that often sounded more like distraction than advice. "Oh, you're very clever, Mr. Jensen," she would say, nodding as the local retired banker triumphantly cornered her rook. "I must be more careful next time." Tonight, however, a new challenger had arrived. Alex Monroe, 28, ambitious, brimming with overconfidence, and utterly unaware of the subtle power that existed in the quiet corners of the world, had come to test himself. He was tall and muscular in a way that suggested years of gym work rather than any intellectual discipline. He had a slick haircut, expensive clothes, and the kind of confident smirk that told everyone he believed he was the smartest person in the room. He strode into the senior center like he owned the place, scanning the room with amusement and mild disdain. Evelyn watched him from the corner of her eye as he approached the chess tables. He did not acknowledge her at first, assuming she was just another harmless, frail participant. He leaned over her board without invitation, shaking the pieces as if to intimidate them, or her. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice calm but carrying an undertone that made him pause, though he did not realize why. "This table is already in use." Alex grinned. "I think I could handle a few pieces moving around. You do not mind if I show you how it's done, right?" Her eyes, gray and sharp, met his. There was a pause that felt like the turning of a key in a lock, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a shiver down his spine. He laughed it off. "Relax, I'm just here for fun." As they began the game, Evelyn allowed him the illusion of control. He opened aggressively, pushing pawns forward, castling with confidence, moving his knights with flourish. He talked constantly, filling the room with his laughter and commentary, certain that his knowledge and youth gave him a clear advantage. Evelyn's moves were subtle, almost lazy in appearance,
She would lift a bishop and pause, glance at the ceiling as if contemplating a memory, and place it down with deliberate slowness. Each move seemed innocuous. Each move seemed random. And yet, slowly, inexorably, Alex found his options dwindling. His attacks met blocks he could not predict. His combinations, which he had practiced obsessively for weeks, were countered effortlessly. He started to notice a pattern, a rhythm in her game that suggested intelligence far beyond what her age or appearance implied. After the first hour, he was sweating, not from physical exertion, but from mental strain. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple, and he barely noticed when Evelyn sipped from her mug of herbal tea, serene as if nothing at all were happening. "You play very differently than anyone else I've met," he said, forcing a laugh. "I thought this would be easy." She smiled faintly, a small, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of her mouth. "Sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the quiet ones." Alex frowned, but he did not understand the weight of her words. He thought of them as mere theatrics, a harmless attempt at mystique. Meanwhile, the other members of the club watched in silence. Some had been around long enough to know better. They had learned not to underestimate Evelyn Harper. They remembered, vaguely, that she had connections, that she had influence, but over the years, it had become a whispered legend, a cautionary tale told with amusement. Evelyn, after all, had never raised her voice or made any overt threat. She simply existed in a way that demanded respect, though it came quietly and invisibly. Alex, oblivious to all this, continued his relentless attack. He moved his queen aggressively, targeting her king, convinced that he had finally found an opening. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her hands poised over the board. She moved her knight with precision, placing him in a position that cut off his escape routes. Alex froze. "What? How?" he stammered. "I did not see that coming." She tilted her head. "Sometimes it's not about what you see, it's about what you do not see." The words were simple, but they carried weight, a gravity that made Alex pause. He began to realize that he had been blinded by his own arrogance. He had underestimated her. Outside, the city slept unaware of the subtle power playing out in the senior center. But inside, the air was thick with tension. Every piece on the board became a symbol, every move a calculated test. Alex had stepped into her world, a world he could not yet comprehend. After another 2 hours, he was exhausted. His hands shook slightly, and he felt a rising panic as he saw his remaining pieces trapped, isolated, and vulnerable. Evelyn remained calm, serene, as if she were merely passing time. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, defeated, and realized for the first time that he had walked into something far more dangerous than a simple chess game. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She did not gloat. She did not taunt. She simply reset the pieces for the next game, as if this were all routine, as if nothing had happened. Alex, on the other hand, could feel his heart racing. He did not know why, but he sensed a deeper current beneath her calm exterior, a current of influence, of connections, of power that reached far beyond the walls of the club. He did not know that Evelyn Harper had spent decades building networks most people would not dare imagine. She had friends in high places, allies who owed her favors that could not be repaid with money or words. Every move she had made on the chessboard mirrored strategies she had used in her life, maneuvering through threats, anticipating betrayal, protecting assets, and maintaining control. Every tactic he had thought he understood was already anticipated, already countered, already folded into a larger design. When Alex finally left that night, he walked out into the cold with a sense of unease he could not explain. He had come seeking entertainment, a test of skill, and perhaps a small victory. Instead, he had stumbled into a labyrinth far beyond his understanding. And as he walked away, he had no idea that Evelyn Harper, the unassuming old woman who always lost to newcomers, had already begun weaving threads that would soon ensnare him in ways he could not yet imagine. The next morning, Alex woke up to an uneasy silence in his apartment. The sunlight filtering through the blinds seemed too bright, too intrusive, as if the world itself was observing him. He shook off the remnants of sleep and went about his routine, trying to convince himself that the unease was just a product of fatigue, nothing more. But the memory of the chess match haunted him. Every pawn, knight, and bishop that had cornered him in the senior center seemed to follow him in his thoughts, each one a small accusation of his arrogance. By mid-morning, he noticed subtle changes in his life. His apartment door had been locked with a slightly different click. His mail, normally untouched until evening, was neatly stacked on the counter. His phone buzzed intermittently with unknown numbers, calls that went straight to voicemail when answered. A lingering sense of being watched gnawed at him. He tried to dismiss it, attributing the oddities to coincidence. But deep down, he knew better. Something had shifted the moment he had left Evelyn Harper's table. Determined not to be intimidated by an elderly woman, he decided to return to the senior center that afternoon. The chess club met on Wednesdays, but he would go early, hoping to observe without being seen. The air outside was crisp, the sky overcast, and every pedestrian seemed ordinary, yet his mind raced with the shadow of potential threats. Alex kept thinking about her words. Sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the quiet ones. As he approached the center, he noticed subtle signs that he had missed before. A black sedan parked a block away, its engine running but empty. A man on a bicycle, who seemed to be casually circling the block, stopped briefly to glance at the building before pedaling away. Alex's pulse quickened. He told himself it was paranoia, but the memory of Evelyn's calm, calculating eyes reminded him that he might be far from safe. Inside the club, the smell of coffee and waxed wood was comforting, yet somehow sinister. Evelyn Harper sat at her usual corner, her hands folded neatly over the chessboard. She looked up and offered a faint, welcoming smile, as if nothing unusual had happened. Alex felt a surge of frustration. He had expected her to be frail, to need help with her moves, to be ordinary. Yet here she was, calm, composed, in control. "Good afternoon, Mr. Monroe," she said quietly. "Back so soon?" "Yes," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I wanted another match." She nodded, moving a bishop slightly, as if to say, "Then we shall proceed." Alex hesitated, sensing that this game was different. It was not just chess. It was a subtle test, a dance of strategy and awareness. The pieces moved across the board, each turn more deliberate than the last. Alex tried to regain control, to assert his dominance, but the feeling of unease persisted. He realized that Evelyn was not just reacting to his moves. She seemed to anticipate them, to manipulate his assumptions and trap him in decisions he had not fully considered. Each small victory he thought he had achieved was immediately neutralized, leaving him exhausted and increasingly aware of the invisible tension in the room. Then it happened. During a brief pause in the game, Evelyn's cell phone rang. A short, sharp ring that echoed through the quiet club. She answered calmly, speaking in a low, measured tone. Alex tried not to eavesdrop, but curiosity got the better of him. He leaned slightly closer, straining to catch snippets of the conversation. "Everything is ready," she said. "No mistakes this time. The
The target is aware, but unaware of the consequences. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. Yet there was an unmistakable edge, a quiet authority that made Alex's stomach churn. He froze, realizing that the conversation was not about knitting circles or club finances. Evelyn Harper had said, "target," and "aware but unaware," as if she were orchestrating something much larger than a game. Alex's heart raced. He had walked into something he did not understand, a world where power, strategy, and threat were intertwined. He did not yet know the extent, but he felt the first ripple of fear. The match continued, but Alex was distracted. Every move she made seemed loaded with hidden meaning, every gesture a subtle warning. He noticed for the first time that the other members of the club were unusually quiet, watching not just the game, but him. Their eyes were steady, knowing, almost complicit in the tension. The room felt like a chessboard itself, with pieces he had not yet recognized. By the end of the game, Alex was defeated again. His remaining pieces were trapped, cornered, and hopelessly vulnerable. He pushed the chair back, frustration and fear mingling in equal measure. "You play well," he said, trying to mask his panic. I underestimated you." Evelyn's eyes met his, steady and piercing. "Underestimation is a dangerous mistake," she said simply. "Not everyone survives it." He left the club in a daze, his mind swirling with questions. Who was she really? How could an elderly woman possess such insight, such control, such power? And why did it feel as though the entire city had shifted around him without his knowledge? The next day, subtle signs escalated. At work, Alex noticed that colleagues who had always been friendly now avoided eye contact. His computer, normally secure, displayed strange error messages.
He found unmarked envelopes in his mailbox, containing nothing but a single black chess piece in each. The message was clear, though cryptic. He had entered a game he did not understand. He tried to investigate Evelyn, to discover the extent of her life outside the senior center. Online searches revealed little. Her presence was minimal, almost non-existent. But old newspapers, archived in public libraries, hinted at something more. There were stories of business disputes, sudden acquisitions, and unexplained financial arrangements, all connected to names that had long been associated with organized crime in the region. Evelyn Harper's name never appeared directly, but patterns suggested her influence, subtle and unseen, reaching far beyond the ordinary life of a retired woman. Late at night, Alex received an anonymous text message. "The game is not over. Your next move will decide more than your pride." Panic gripped him. He tried to call Evelyn, to confront her, but the line went dead the moment she answered. There was no hint of emotion in her voice when she had spoken, just a calm certainty that left him trembling. For the first time, Alex understood the truth. The chess games were not merely a pastime. They were lessons, tests, and warnings. Evelyn Harper had been teaching him without his knowledge, probing his intellect, his courage, his assumptions. And now he was trapped in a larger strategy, one that reached into places he could not see, touching people, debts, and promises that had existed long before he had been born. Fear became a constant companion. Every stranger's glance felt loaded, every shadow suspicious. He began to notice black sedans parked at unusual distances, quiet vans with tinted windows near his apartment, and men and women who seemed ordinary by day, but whose movements at night suggested coordination. He understood that Evelyn Harper's world was vast, a network of influence and control that no ordinary man could penetrate without consequence. One evening, he returned to the senior center, driven by a mixture of fear and curiosity. He needed answers, needed to see for himself the scope of her power. The club was quieter than usual. Evelyn sat in her usual corner, sipping tea, as if nothing had changed. Alex approached cautiously. "Evelyn," he began, his voice low, "I need to understand. Who are you?" She looked at him with a calm intensity that froze him. "I am many things," she said softly. "And you are learning the consequences of curiosity." Before he could respond, the door opened and a young man in a black coat entered, holding a briefcase. He greeted Evelyn respectfully, and she nodded. Alex watched in stunned silence as the two exchanged subtle signals, movements, and gestures that spoke volumes.
He realized that every piece on the chessboard, every move she had made, was mirrored in the real world. Her strategies extended far beyond the senior center, reaching into places he could not comprehend. Alex's panic peaked. He understood that he was no longer just a player in a game of chess. He was a piece on a much larger board, one where the consequences of missteps could be far graver than a lost pawn or queen. He had underestimated her, and now he was seeing the results. Evelyn stood, her small frame commanding attention in a way that seemed impossible. "Come," she said, gesturing for him to follow. "It's time you see the board in full." As they walked down a narrow hallway lined with photographs of past members, Alex noticed subtle details he had never seen before. Portraits of men and women who were not just club members, but individuals with connections that extended deep into the city's underworld. Documents tucked into frames, small keys, and codes written in the margins hinted at a life far removed from ordinary retirement. Evelyn's life was a tapestry of power, influence, and careful orchestration, and he was just beginning to glimpse the edges. By the time they reached a small, locked door at the back of the building, Alex's heart pounded in his chest. Evelyn handed him a key, her expression unreadable. "Step carefully," she said. "Every move has consequences." As he turned the key and opened the door, Alex stepped into a room that would change his understanding of Evelyn Harper forever. The room beyond the door was dimly lit, lined with tall shelves that groaned under the weight of old ledgers, folders, and stacks of yellowed paper. Maps of the city were pinned to the walls, marked with pins, lines, and notes in Evelyn's precise handwriting. It was a small command center, almost hidden beneath the senior center, yet it pulsed with quiet authority. Alex's eyes darted from one detail to another, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. Each file, each map, each carefully labeled envelope suggested decades of careful orchestration, a life lived in shadows that most people could not even imagine. This is, Alex began, struggling to find words. How is this even possible? Evelyn Harper turned to him, her gaze steady. It is only possible because most people never look closely. They assume, they judge, and they dismiss. That is how I move, unseen yet always present. She gestured toward a large table in the center of the room, where a chessboard was set up again. But this one was different. Its pieces were carved from wood and inlaid with small metal symbols, each representing a person, a place, or an asset. Every game you've played with me, she continued, was a reflection of this. A rehearsal, if you will, for understanding the consequences of your choices. Alex swallowed hard. The fear that had been gnawing at him for days now solidified into a chilling awareness.
He was not simply a player who had lost to an old woman. He was a pawn on a board much larger than he could have imagined. And he had moved recklessly, revealing his tendencies, his arrogance, his lack of foresight. Evelyn had learned everything she needed to know about him. "Why me?" Alex whispered. "Why target me?" "Target? You misunderstand," Evelyn replied. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried the weight of undeniable authority. "You are not a target. You are a lesson. And lessons are necessary for growth or survival." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You have been reckless. You have assumed power and knowledge that you did not possess. Now, you must see what lies beneath the surface." Before Alex could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. 2 men in black suits entered the room, their movements silent and precise. They carried briefcases and nodded respectfully to Evelyn. She acknowledged them with a single tilt of her head. Alex realized with growing horror that these were not ordinary assistants. They were part of a network she had built, individuals trained to observe, report, and act according to her commands. "You see, Alex," Evelyn said, walking past him to adjust one of the chess pieces on the table. "Control is not brute force. Control is knowledge, patience, and the ability to anticipate moves before they are made. You thought you understood strategy, but you were only scratching the surface." Alex's mind raced. He had assumed this was all a game, that the senior center was harmless, that Evelyn was simply a quirky old woman who enjoyed chess. Now, every subtle glance, every calm smile, every deliberate loss in the club made sense. She had been testing him, observing his reactions, evaluating his character. And in that observation, she had already begun to manipulate events beyond the walls of the club. Can you stop this?" Alex asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "If I apologize, Evelyn raised a hand. "It is not about stopping. It is about understanding. The consequences of underestimation are not optional. They are inevitable." The 2 men in black placed their briefcases on the table and opened them. Inside were photographs, documents, and small digital devices. Each item represented a piece of Alex's life: his friends, his colleagues, his recent transactions, even notes from his personal journal. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Every action he had taken over the past week had been observed, recorded, and analyzed. There was no escape, no privacy, no illusion of safety. Evelyn walked around the table, moving pieces and adjusting pins on the maps with calm precision.
Every decision, every move you make in life has a consequence. Some consequences are minor, some are transformative.
She paused, placing her hand on a small carved pawn. "This one represents you, Alex, and your next move will determine how the rest of your life unfolds." Alex's knees went weak. He had imagined threats, imagined danger, but nothing had prepared him for the meticulous, deliberate power she wielded. He was trapped in a web of strategy, manipulation, and foresight that extended far beyond his understanding. "You could run," Evelyn continued, her voice almost conversational. "You could try to hide, but you would find that every path has been considered, every escape has been anticipated. You have played this game poorly, but now you will see the stakes in full." At that moment, the door to the room opened again. More figures entered, moving with quiet confidence. Alex recognized the subtle uniformity of their movements, the efficiency in their gestures. They were part of Evelyn's network, a structure that had been cultivated over decades. She had friends in business, law enforcement, and politics,
connections that allowed her to act with impunity, to influence events with nothing more than a gesture or a whispered instruction. Alex felt the first true surge of panic. He realized that his arrogance had not only put him in danger, but had also exposed him to a system he could not comprehend, a force far beyond his ability to control. Every instinct told him to flee, but the network of Evelyn's influence was already tightening, subtly and invisibly. Evelyn leaned over the table, adjusting a piece that represented one of the men in black. "You see, Alex, strategy is not just about winning. It is about foresight, patience, and understanding the consequences of underestimating your opponent. You have learned much, but the lesson is not yet complete." Alex tried to speak, to plead, to negotiate, but no words came. He realized that conversation was no longer an option. His life, his choices, and his future were now part of a game that he could not fully comprehend. Every detail of his existence had been noted, every weakness observed, and every decision anticipated. The room fell silent except for the soft ticking of a clock. Evelyn's eyes, calm and unyielding, met his. In that gaze, Alex saw the embodiment of a lifetime of strategy, power, and influence. He understood, in a chilling moment of clarity, that he had underestimated her, and that underestimation had consequences far beyond the chessboard. Evelyn spoke again, her voice steady and unrelenting. "You have one choice, Alex. One move that will determine how this game ends. Choose wisely, for there are no do-overs."
Alex looked at the table, at the intricate chess pieces and maps, and then at the network of people in the room. He understood that any move he made would ripple outward, affecting not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. Fear, for the first time, became absolute. He took a deep breath, trying to summon courage. "And if I refuse?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Evelyn smiled faintly, a small curl of lips that held no warmth. "Refusal is a move in itself, and it is often the most dangerous of all." The weight of her words pressed down on him. He realized that he was not merely confronting an old woman who played chess. He was confronting a lifetime of calculated power, a network that had been built silently, methodically, over decades. Every step he had taken, every assumption he had made, had led him to this moment. Then, Evelyn picked up a small, black pawn and placed it directly in front of Alex. "Your move," she said softly. Alex stared at the piece, knowing that whatever choice he made next would define the rest of his life. And for the first time, he understood the truth of her warning. Sometimes the most dangerous opponents are the quiet ones. Outside the senior center, the city continued unaware. Cars passed, streetlights flickered, and people went about their mundane lives, oblivious to the intricate game unfolding beneath their feet.
But inside, the air was electric with tension, the weight of consequences pressing down on a young man who had dared to underestimate an old woman named Evelyn Harper. He reached for the pawn, his hand trembling. In that moment, he realized that he had crossed a line from which there was no return. Evelyn watched him, serene, patient, omniscient. The pieces on the table, the maps on the walls, the network of unseen eyes, they all converged in this single, inevitable moment. Alex made his move, not knowing whether it would save him or seal his fate. And as the chess piece clicked against the table, Evelyn Harper's faint smile deepened, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a lesson delivered and a game played to perfection. In that room,
hidden beneath the ordinary exterior of a senior center. The true nature of strategy, power, and consequence had been revealed. And Alex Monroe, once confident and reckless, now understood the terrifying reality. He had been outplayed by someone the world had long underestimated.